Elite Junior Day means elite recruiting. On this episode of Around the Paw, we're going to recap what was a most profitable elite junior retreat day for Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. It resulted in 3 big-time commits for Clemson football. And so we're going to break all that down, and we're going to talk some Clemson basketball for good measure as well, with the Tigers coming off of a nice rebound victory over the Louisville Cardinals last night. So we're so glad you're joining us for this episode of Around the Paw. We've got a lot to get to. So without further ado, I'm Garrett Mitchell, Griffin Barfield, and Clifton Kennedy. If you want to follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, there's our Twitter handles right there at the bottom. So, hey, we'd love for you to follow along. I can't always promise that it's going to be the most rational things in the world if you follow me, but hey, that's part of the fun. So come check us out. But guys, tell you what, it's been quite a week for Clemson football and basketball. So let's kick it off, no pun intended, with Elite Junior Day. I tell you what, I don't know that I can ever remember an Elite Junior Day that was as fruitful as this 2024 event was. 3 commitments, and just what we needed. 2 of them were elite offensive linemen.
A win for the trenches, right? The other one, a defensive tackle. It's just honestly great to see. Matt Luke already getting right to business. Chris Rumpf has been to business, has got a couple of huge prospects. So it's great to see that, these assistant coaches are making huge waves. And, we were lacking a little bit on the offensive line, especially this recruiting class. So getting a great amount of recruits that are very high quality is huge because it helps us later on down the road. And I know that we have an experienced line going into this season, but it's going to be nice to see a little bit more young bucks around the offensive line room come 2025.
Yeah, I think offensive linemen are definitely what we need. We hit a sweet spot with those 2 guys, and Matt Luke and Chris Rumpf are hitting the ground running, and that's good to see. Good to have those guys as coaches, and good to see that they're getting some fruit on the tree.
Right, guys. And when you look at these 2 offensive linemen that just committed to the Tigers, look, these are some of the highest rated linemen that Clemson's been able to pull in quite some time. The 2 guys who committed were Brayden Jacobs. He's from Buford High School in Alpharetta, Georgia. And then you've got Jaylan Beckley, who's from Addison, Texas. Look at their offer list. And, I mean, you're talking about the likes of Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Texas, who were all over these guys. They're both high 4 stars in terms of composite rankings. Look, these are big time. These are heavy hitters. And, I think these guys are really going to help pave the way for this Clemson running game for years to come.
I agree. And I was really happy about the Brayden Jacobs one coming from a Giants fan, son of Brayden Jacobs, the running back. So that was really nice to see when worlds collide. But I like both these guys. Jacobs, 6'7", 310. That's all you really need to know about a guy like this. And I mean, the same thing goes for Beckley. He's a little bit more on the lower side, but he could be a raw prospect that I could see Matt Luke turning into a Clemson superstar. Like we always know that these guys that don't start off great, in terms of how they look recruiting wise, and they turn into be Clemson legends. So for both these guys, I'm really excited. It strung a great moment for me for Jacobs, but I'm excited to see both him and Beckley and, how they perform later on down the road.
Yeah, don't forget about Chauncey Goodwin too. I think it's great to see all these guys and just to see them on campus and get to see what they can do.
Yeah, look, I don't think that Clemson is done with offensive linemen in this 2025 recruiting class. I saw somewhere today where preferably they would like to take 6 offensive linemen in this class. Well, you've got 3. You already had Easton Ware on board. But look, another one, this is the biggest fish in the pond. David Sanders Jr., and he's from Providence Day. That's just north of Charlotte. So it's not very far. It's about 2.5 hours from Clemson. And David Sanders Jr., he's the number 1 overall ranked player in the 2025 class. How often do you see an offensive lineman as the number 1 player in his class? Doesn't happen very often, and that should tell you how good he is. And what's great news for Tigers fans, or at least you have to have your fingers crossed, is he speaks very, very highly of Clemson. He's been on campus several times, and he has publicly stated that he likes Matt Luke and has built a really good relationship with him. You know, we're not going to sit here and speculate that he commits to Clemson, but I think the Tigers have just as good a chance as anybody to get him.
No, I completely agree. And you've consistently seen these recruits before they've committed, in the past that are like, I do like Clemson. I really like their culture. Matt Luke has been brought up by every one of these offensive line prospects, which is, I think, a great thing to see. But if Clemson bring in a 5-star offensive tackle that is not only the best offensive tackle in the class, but the best player in the recruiting class, that would be huge, not only for, the team as a whole, but in terms of the influence that it shows on different teams and the college football world, because, the transfer portal now and then, it really isn't. People are kind of looking at that more heavily than recruiting. If you get the best guy in the class, you're obviously going to be looked at to a higher regard than if you wouldn't have it. So I think it's a huge get for Clemson if they do get it. Obviously, the big dogs are coming in Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. They're going to go all in for him, but it might come down to the wire. You might see him pick Clemson in his last few choices and might go down to the wire. So might be a fun one to watch as it goes along, but I love this prospect of David Sanders. I think it'd be huge if he came to Clemson. So I'm going to knock on wood and keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's definitely really, really good, or he wouldn't have gotten the number 1 ranking. It's good to see him love Matt Luke, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's real good friends with some of the other recruits too. I think I've seen that that they're trying to pull him on board too. So he really speaks really high of Clemson, which is really good. And again, I think that comes down to family and just the way that Clemson runs their program, right?
Yeah, and look, I think it's 10 or 11 commits now for this class. Well, we'll get to that thought in a minute, because I was just about to leave off the third commitment that was a product of this elite junior day, elite retreat that Dabo Swinney does every year, and that's Isaiah Campbell, big-time defensive lineman. He is a consensus-rated 4-star defensive lineman, and I'll tell you what, this is another one. Clemson, we just stay recruiting and we stay bringing in elite defensive linemen. And, if even in these last 3 seasons where we've been down a little bit, if we're doing anything else, we're still getting that elite talent on defense.
I think you got to credit Nick Eason too with the defensive line. He's doing a phenomenal job in the way that he's been able to recruit these defensive tackles. But I really want to point out what Campbell said when he committed, and it's on 3 Sports. I forget who wrote the article, but it was a phenomenal article. He said that he chose the Tigers after the 4-4 start to the season, and how they rattled off 5 wins. They didn't show any quit in this team, and they turned out, won the Gator Bowl. They won out, and that's why he committed. That's what he said in the article. So, it even comes to show that why you don't give up during the middle of the season. When Clemson was 4-4, they could have called it quits, threw in the towel, went down and out. That's not what this team did, and recruits see that. Teams see that. Coaches see that. Maybe that could have been an influence to, Matt Luke, Chris Rumpf. I mean, who knows? Maybe transfers too, if, the transfer portal opens up. But I love this. I love this pickup. He's a top 5, top 6 defensive lineman in the class. And, Nick Eason's going to turn him into an absolute beast. So I'm excited for him. It's turning out to be a top class. I think Clemson's top 3 in recruiting so far, which is an incredible start. Yep. Number 2. Beat my expectations. I think Notre Dame's the only one on top.
Yep,
so
that's exactly
right. Incredible. It's a great start, and I'm really excited to see what this recruiting class turns into, especially down the road.
Yeah, you're talking about on the defensive side of the ball, how we just keep getting talent. Every year we load up with more talent, and you're talking about Nick Eason, but don't forget about Wes Goodwin. He's the leader of that defense,
and Chris Rumpf.
And Chris Rumpf too. I mean, you got the two coaches that came into the fold after the season are both knocking it out of the park, and so it's just good to see that defense reload every year.
Well, before we move on, excuse me, before we move on from football, we're about to talk some basketball. Big win last night, and some very interesting comments that Coach Brownell made in his post-game press conference last night that were perhaps a little bit on the edgy side, but we're going to get to that. But I do want to throw this out there because I saw the cutest thing on Twitter today, and I tell you what, it's just like, it's like a proud parent. Sometimes you just have to smile. Our little brothers just down I-26 in Columbia put it out there. Nice, beautiful little graphic on their official team Twitter that they are holding open tryouts for walk-ons. Now, isn't that the most adorable thing you could possibly all those little Gamecocks just running around the football field, the precocious little guys trying to make the football team. Oh my goodness. It's just like a proud parent. Sometimes you just have to laugh and smile at them.
I mean, Carolina students, if you're interested, bring your Carolina card. That's all you really need. That's what the thing says. I mean, we were hosting walk-ons, but that was for kicker. And they sure do not need any walk-ons for basketball because what happened yesterday, they beat Tennessee. But I guess really 16-9 is getting in their heads. I might be speaking too much about that, but it is funny to see when these huge collegiate teams are trying to get these students from different schools, especially South Carolina. It's a different feeling for a rival like a Clemson fan. So it's funny. It is funny for sure to see. I did laugh a little when I saw it. I sent it to my friend. He goes to Carolina.
It was funny, and I saw that Barstool Clemson retweeted it and kind of snickered at it a little bit. I was sitting beside Griffin, and I think I showed it to him.
You did, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was so funny.
Well, look, all I'll say to our feathered friends down in Columbia is don't count on there being any semi-retired stockbrokers out there that you can bring on to kick.
Beamer ball no more.
Oh my goodness!
Well,
so funny.
Good laugh. Look, everybody needs a smile and everybody needs a laugh every day. But speaking of smiling, I tell you what, Clemson basketball's got to be smiling a little bit. It wasn't easy. They had to fight till late in the game to put really a scrappy Louisville team away. But I tell you what, when you're coming off the disappointment that was the Duke game, you'll take a win any way you can get it. And last night, Clemson Tigers have found a way to get it done, even though it took them a little while longer than they would have liked.
Nice little deep breath at the end of that game too. But at the end of the day, a win's a win, like you said. But we do have to talk about Clemson. We're up 20+ halfway through the second. Louisville went on a huge run. I believe it was like 34-11 run to close out the game, which is crazy. They cut the lead to 4, which was once again crazy because there was like 20+ with 8 minutes to go. But a win's a win. And, Louisville's a very gritty team. They started shooting the ball because, hey, why not? We're down by points and shots followed. But I think it's a great Clemson win. You saw a little bit more of zone, and that helped limit Louisville's three-point percentage. I think they missed their first 12 or 13 three-point shots. They didn't make their first till halfway through the second when that whole scoring affair happened. But it's a huge win defensively, offensively. PJ Hall had a great game. They still need to figure out a little bit more from three-point percentage. But yeah, onto Virginia, which is a test in itself.
Yeah, Brownell said last night. He said they didn't have the best shooting game last night, and he said he didn't know. He doesn't talk about it a lot, but they got to do something to get better. And he said he talked about how the guards didn't rebound the ball very well and everything. But overall, coming into this game, after coming off that Duke loss, I knew, the point spread was, I think, 15.5. And I thought it might be closer to 10 coming in, just because you're coming off that tough loss and you got to overcome all that. So I thought they did really well. But it was just great to see a win, and leaving there at 12:30 last night. I tell you what, man, that was crazy. Night games.
Grit after dark, baby.
Yeah.
Grit after dark.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, look, Griffin said Louisville started the game cold and they weren't really connecting on much. But I think now's a good time to say that you can't miss with our sponsor, Ardensburger Grill at 1280 18 Mile Road Central. So you got to go check those guys out. You can tell them the crew from Around the Paw sent you. They've got the best food around. The double dip wings, amazing. They're our favorites, but they've also got mouth-watering burgers, sizzling grills, and a whole variety of foods that are guaranteed to be a 3-point shot to your stomach. So go check them out, Ardensburger Grill at 1280 18 Mile Road Central, and they'll be glad to have you there, and they'll get you going with a great meal. So check them out, and we love them. We know you will too. Now, let's talk a few minutes about what Coach Brad Brownell said after the game. And now, if we thought he went scorched earth after the Duke game, and he did, which is great to see, I tell you what, he didn't stop with a little bit of the edgy comments after the game, but this time it was surrounding, and I watched the video, and it wasn't even necessarily that he was prompted to say it. I think he kind of did it on his own. And
he did it on his own for sure.
Yeah. And it was around the narrative that whoever thought you'd hear this, that the ACC is lagging behind and is down in basketball. We hear it in football, certainly not basketball, but Coach Brownell was he was fired up.
Yeah, he went on I think like 2-3 minute tangent about the net, and he brought up the Georgia Tech North Carolina game because Georgia Tech shocked the world, and it made a lot of sense. I really think, because the ACC dominated in the ACC SEC Challenge. Clemson beat Alabama, which I thought was huge. And there were plenty other games that mattered in that way. And I think he talked about the Big 12 too. He was talking about stat padding games, and he was talking about how the ACC, before the conference games start, Clemson loads up opponents, and that's going to help them for their NCAA tournament bid if they do end up getting one. But he was talking about how these Big 12 teams stat pad and blow these teams out by 30, and completely just kind of put the net on upside down. I believe that's what he did say. But yeah, he went off. And do I think the ACC is lagging behind? No, I really don't. I think there are still some huge key pieces. And you can just look at teams like Duke and North Carolina. Miami made a Final Four last year.
Yeah,
there you go. So I really think that the net I disagree with to a great extent. And I think Brownell made up some huge points that I think everybody should be talking about a lot more, because it's screwing up the ACC in my honest opinion. And I'm sure that Brownell can agree with me. ACC fans across the conference can agree with me that it's a little iffy. It's a little iffy. I don't think it should be trusted.
Yeah, so I did a story. It's up now, and go check it out at clemsonsportsmedia.com. But go check out the story I did this afternoon where I talked about what Coach Brownell was saying, kind of the point that he was trying to get at. And go ahead, I've got it pulled up right here. And Griffin, you talked about where he was going on about the net rankings. And here's one of the direct quotes from his press conference last night. And Coach Brownell said, and I quote, "It's obviously frustrating for the coaches and the players in the league. The narrative is not right. Hopefully our league and everyone else will do more, but we cannibalize each other. I think it's an overreach because you can completely pad your stats by playing a weak schedule and winning by 40. Your efficiency numbers change. So then the question is, we overschedule probably." And I think he's exactly right. Look, Clemson's not a team or a program that's going to shy away from playing the best competition, but it's a lot easier to make yourself look better when you're going out there and playing teams that you're going to beat by 30 or 40 than if you challenge yourself with 7 or 8 teams. Look, you might only win half of those games, and your record's probably not going to look near as good. But I think it becomes a matter of quality over quantity when you see how well do you play against these squads, even if they're games you lose by 4, 5, 6 points, but they're competitive.
I mean, it's only going to help Clemson because, wins over TCU, wins over South Carolina, wins over Alabama. I mean, Memphis earlier. Now they're not really doing so well. It's going to help them down the road. And Brownell also brought up how, if this is going to be the case, if teams are going to stat pad, win by 30, 40 points, and be teams that are bigger than, what they might end up being performance-wise, Brownell was interested in switching games to an 18-16 game type ACC, like round robin, if you know what I mean. And because the ACC is just a bloodbath this year. I mean, like I said, Georgia Tech beat UNC. There have been losses like that. Georgia Tech's only ACC wins have been against Duke, UNC, and Clemson, who are the three
Who else
ACC
is going to
teams
win those?
That are in bracketology.
Who else is going to win? Who else is going to beat Clemson, Duke, and North Carolina all in one season?
Nobody.
Right. Well, and that's a quote. That's another thing that Brownell said in his postgame, and I've got the quote right here. And he was talking about the narrative that the ACC's down or the teams are not as good this year. And his exact quote is, "That's a joke." His words, "That's a joke." Talking about Georgia Tech. So they're good enough to beat North Carolina, Duke, and Clemson, but you're saying they're not very good? That's insane. Let's get some other teams to try and beat all three of us. So, Clifton, I mean, you were right there on top of it. I don't know that there's many teams who are going to beat North Carolina, Duke, and Clemson in the same year. I mean, that's a murderer's row trifecta right there. Well, Georgia Tech did. You have to look past their record. You and Clifton were there when they came back from 9 points down with 93 seconds to play, beat Clemson in double overtime. There's a reason. Look, some self-inflicted things by Clemson, but there's a reason teams still have to capitalize on it. Georgia Tech did, and the reason that they did is because, well, guess what? They're a good team too.
I agree. And, with these three games, not all of them were at Georgia Tech. North Carolina and Duke were at Georgia Tech. Clemson was in Clemson, and there was a pretty decent crowd for a Tuesday night when that double overtime game happened. And they stayed pretty late. Everybody stayed pretty late. Like, it was very packed. Compared to Louisville yesterday, people kind of left after that 20-point game. People were there the whole time. And it is, I'm not sure if you've seen how the Big 12, the SEC play. It is incredibly hard to lose or to win away from home. It is incredibly hard. And that's why teams are so balanced this year. And so do I think even a top 10 team could go through a gauntlet of UNC, Duke, and Clemson? Maybe Clemson to a greater extent, but I don't think that they can go through Duke and UNC in the same season and beat them. Maybe at their home court, but I'd only expect that from a top 10 team or a national champion like UConn to do that.
Yeah. And guys, I'll say this too. I do want to touch on, and this is something I had twirling around in my head today, and I want to touch on this topic. I'm going to kind of harken back to the Duke game just a little bit, but from a different perspective, from a different angle. Clifton, you and I were talking about this on the 3.5, 4 hour drive home. We talked about it at great length, how it was absurd that there's a contingent of Clemson fans. I'm sure we're going to get some people watching this that are going to at least let me know about it in the comments that they disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. Civil discourse is one of the great things that drives our society, but it was amazing to me the sheer percentage of Clemson fans who, despite everything that we saw from the officiating, we're not going to get back on that, but they still blamed Brad Brownell for that loss. I saw plenty of comments last night blaming him for the fact that the game against Louisville was far closer than people thought it should have been. At what point, maybe there was something to what Dabo Swinney said during football season. At what point is winning not enough? Mm-hmm. Look, I've had plenty of basketball coaches and football coaches tell me over the years, in the 30 years that I've been involved in sports, you can win ugly. You can't lose pretty. So at what point is winning not enough?
For me, because of the incredible start to the season, Brownell has already resolved his problems compared to last season when he had it's basically a mirror of what happened last year. You do very poorly in the non-conference games and you are top of the ACC. It's completely flipped, but in a better way because Clemson have a better resume. So for me, if Brad Brownell does not make the NCAA tournament, I think that I would start to go against him because you had an incredible start. And I get it. The ACC is tough, but currently, according to Joe Lenardi's bracketology, I believe you are a 7 seed.
Yeah.
And you have good games. I think Clemson have its toughest 5-game stretch for the rest of the season. I think you got Virginia, Miami, NC State, Wake Forest, and North Carolina. I think those are the 5 teams. If you win 3 of those 2, I think you're completely okay. If you win 2 of those 3, I think you're completely okay, because a couple of those are away. I think Syracuse might be one of them too. So I don't think it's an issue. I think if fans are looking at Brownell, I think it's a little bit of an an over. I disagree with them. I think that he's doing a great job. He's just been dealt the wrong hand in some games. For example, I think Duke was a very rough game. I think the only games I would consider are kind of like Georgia Tech, especially towards the end, and Virginia Tech. Those are my only bad losses, in my honest opinion. But you just got to see how the season ends. But if Clemson don't make the tournament, especially with their incredible start, their best start since 2008, I believe, you might have to start. I might have to change my mind about Brad Brownell. But I think Clemson's completely okay in the situation they are.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with you. At some point, coaching can only go so far. Like, sometimes you got to blame it on the players. Like, the players go out there and play, right?
Right.
And like last game, like Louisville. I mean, at some point, the players have to just buck up and play defense, and do the job. Because last night, Brad said in 3 different timeouts, he was like, strangle them, get them by the throat and strangle them. And they didn't. And so it took them coming down to the last minute, to hold off a couple of runs. And, I'm going to wash out the one at Virginia Tech because that's an away game, but the Georgia Tech, like, you got to win your home games. And you can't let a team like Georgia Tech. Now, yes, they beat all 3 of the big boys in the ACC. Okay. But at some point, you can't let Georgia Tech come back, hit a 3 at the end of regulation, and then take it into double overtime and hit a 3 to win. Like, that just can't happen.
Yeah, and I think it's a double-edged sword. And certainly I do think that there's some validity to some arguments that people have about, Brownell's ability to coach through the end of games. And that's all well and good. And like I said, I'm not discounting those opinions. I think there's probably some validity in some areas. But at the same time, and Griffin and Cliff, you said it perfectly, I think. Take the Duke game, for instance. Look, he's only coaching. He didn't make the refs call it the way they did. He didn't make the refs make bad calls. He did not use some sort of magical force ability like Obi-Wan Kenobi and make Clemson turn the ball over. He didn't just extend his hand out, the ball come free, and Duke steal it. So at some point, there's a line where his ability to coach and the way the players executed on the court, there's a line there, and one stops and the other begins. So yeah, I think it's unfair to lay for the people who are laying all of the blame at his feet. I think there's some valid points, but I don't think it's completely justified to completely put that burden on his shoulders.
There were some games where shooting kind of just took the game out of proportion. But I said, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, that I'm looking at Florida State and I'm looking at how Brad Brownell coaches them. They won by 11 in Tallahassee. And they played a lot of zone. They were able to switch up the ball. They were able to switch up full and Florida State team that was playing great defense. So, I mean, in that case, I'm looking at Virginia too. You're not going to win the game by shooting the 3 ball. It's Tony Bennett's defensive system. They let in 58 points a game. It's one of the best defenses in the country. And you have to break that. So for me, especially these next 5 games too, but I'm looking especially at Virginia because the better coach wins. I think Clemson are the better team on paper. I think that if Brad Brownell gets outcoached by Tony Bennett, which he very much could, that could determine the point of the game just because of the way they play defense. Brad has a big task to do, and I expect a lot more from him in this game compared to a game against Louisville, compared to maybe a game against Duke, because Virginia is just such a difficult puzzle to fill out and complete.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You can only do so much, and coaches. I'm gonna go back to it. Coaches can only do so much, but you have to execute on the court. But you can't get out coached against a good coach like Tony Bennett. and you just gotta make the right calls and hope the players can execute.
Yeah, I agree, and I'll even throw this out there just in regards to Virginia. Riven, you said it. They're an elite defensive team, but Tony Bennett's teams, they've never been exactly known for lighting up the scoreboard. They hang their hat on defense, but I think this is probably his weakest offensive team that he's had. So they have to hold teams to 58 points to win because they're not scoring a lot themselves. So if you're Coach Brownell and Clemson, I think defense, now certainly you're going to put some things in to try to score the ball, but you have to make sure you can lock them down. If you can hold them to 52, 55 points yourself, I think you've got a great shot at that point.
I agree. And Virginia scored a lot of points through turnovers too, and that's through their star guy, Reese Beekman. He leads the ACC in steals. He leads the ACC in assists. And I think he leads them in scoring, or he's one of the top guys. I think Clemson only need to worry about three guys. They need to worry about Beekman. They need to worry about Ryan Dunn. He's a guard too. He leads the team, I believe, in rebounds and blocks as a 6'8" guard. I think that's incredible. And then they have to worry about the guard McNeely. He shoots the best from three. He shoots 47.1% from three, which is nuts if you're a consistent starter. So I really think Clemson could find success down low. I mean, you got to be able to lock up. Maybe you see a little bit more of this 2-3 defense that Brad has been playing consistently. But I really think Clemson have the tools, and I think you got to run it through PJ Hall if Clemson want to get back in the get back in the win column today or on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you always have to run your offense through PJ Hall as long as he's on the court, just because of the type of player he is. But we also need to shoot well. Like we need to have a good field goal percentage and make shots because like I said earlier, Brad said in his press conference that, we're not shooting the ball well in our own building. And that's not good. Like you have to shoot the ball well, period. But you have to shoot the ball well at home. And if we're going to beat a team like Virginia with an excellent defense, we have to make shots, especially three-pointers.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. Totally, guys. Well, as we wrap up this episode of Around the Paw, speaking about basketball, don't reject that like and subscribe button. Go hammer down on it. Give us a sub. Give us a like. Helps us out. And shout out to everybody who watched our last video. That was a rather lively recap of the Duke game. We're getting up to close to 2,000 views on that one, and just incredible response to that one. We appreciate all of our viewers, everybody that interacts and leaves us comments. So keep doing that. It helps us and lets us know that you're enjoying what we're doing as well. We love doing it as much as you like watching it. So, hey, appreciate it to everybody out there watching this. So
before we get out of here, I want to say two things. Don't forget there is a gymnastics meet this weekend, Friday at 7 p.m. and there's a softball game, the orange and purple game on Sunday.
Men's soccer parade Saturday morning.
Yep. Men's soccer parade too, and basketball on Saturday. So, get out and support the Tigers because there's a lot of stuff going on this weekend.
For sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll even throw this in there too. We're going to do an episode soon on baseball and softball because that's getting ready to get underway as well. A lot to be excited about right now at Clemson. Just so much going on, so much success. And, hey, like we always say, it's a great day to be a Clemson Tiger. All day, every day.
Can't get better than this, right?
Yeah,
that's exactly right. So everybody out there in YouTube land, we appreciate it once again. And I hope you like this episode, and we'll hope you tune in for the next one. But for now, this is Garrett Mitchell, Griffin Barfield, and Clifton Kennedy signing off from Around the Paw and saying, Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.